Hello and welcome to Big Friendly Rub. I hope you're doing well. And we're still in somewhat of a heat wave here in the UK. Thankfully it's cooled down a bit today because I don't want to be cooking in a really hot kitchen in a 37-degree weather like it was the other day. But it's still really quite warm today. It's lovely and sunny. It's because of this lovely weather that I decided last week to start a little mini series of picnic foods and showing you how to make them. Last week I showed you how to make a really simple but really delicious sausage roll. So we're going to continue on that theme this week by showing you how to make Scotch eggs. Now I love Scotch eggs. They are one of my favourite foods. I love having them for lunch. You can have them for breakfast, any time. To be honest, I'll eat a Scotch egg at any time. Now, one of the first things about Scotch eggs you need to know is they're not Scottish. Despite a lot of people thinking, because of the name, they're Scottish. They're not. It's Scotch eggs, not Scots eggs. There's been a lot of things put forward about where Scotch eggs originated from, and there's been nothing definitive about where they initially came from. The very well-known and very expensive store here in the UK called Fortnum & Mason, they seem to think that they created Scotch eggs like around in like 1730 or something like that. Nowhere's ever really staked a claim on, yes, Scotch eggs came from here. I think the first instance of the name Scotch egg appeared in like the late 1800s, but again, nothing's conclusive. But what I do know is they're bloody delicious, and that's why I'm going to show you how to make them today. Now, to me, there's no such thing as a bad Scotch egg. I've had Scotch eggs from petrol stations and still enjoyed, but there's something about making a perfect Scotch egg at home. And the best thing about making them at home, you can tailor them to yourselves. My preferred choice is usually to not only use sausage meat, but black pudding as well, because I adore black pudding, and it's just, there's something about it. But not a lot of people like black pudding because they think, ugh, blood, because black pudding is made of blood. But that really doesn't bother me. But because of that reason of people being a bit squeamish about it, I'm not going to show you how to make it with black pudding today. I'm going to make it purely with sausage meat, but I'm going to add a little something else in that will take it up a notch. But without further ado, enough talking, enough history lessons. Let's go and make Scotch eggs. Now, to make our Scotch eggs, it doesn't involve too many ingredients. There are just some steps involved in making the Scotch eggs that makes it a little bit longer. But the actual ingredients themselves are very simple. And if you want to see those, I will chuck them up on the screen right now. So you can see there's not too many ingredients involved. You can pause the screen, write them down right now, or delve into the YouTube description where they are as well. Or you can just simply go to my website and get them from there as well. So if you're satisfied that you're happy with these ingredients, then you can skip on to the next bit where we're actually making stuff. But if you want to hear about the ingredients and why I'm using them, then carry on watching. So for making our Scotch eggs, we're going to need some eggs, but otherwise they'd be not very good Scotch eggs without some of these. And we're going to need 4 for the actual filling of the Scotch egg and 2 for creating a egg wash to help bind our breadcrumbs to the Scotch egg. So 6 eggs, preferably large. If you use medium, then you might want to bring down the cooking time of the egg a little bit later, just because small eggs means less cooking time. Then we're going to need some sausage meat. I'm getting mine from these sausages. You can get standalone sausage meat, like I said last week in the sausage roll recipe, but that's usually around Christmas time that starts popping up to be a bit more common. So if you can't get sausage meat by itself, then you can pick up a pack of sausages and just squeeze the sausage meat. Don't know what that gesture was. You can squeeze the sausage meat out of the sausages to get the sausage meat that way. If you're feeling fancy, you can pick up fancier sausages. You could pick up like sausages with black pudding in it already, or you can pick up chorizo sausages to make it super fancy. But I'm just sticking with plain pork sausages, and we're going to just add some seasonings and extra bits of our own. And one of those extra bits is this apple, because I like to grate an apple into the sausage meat, and that gives it a little bit of juiciness, that lovely apple flavour that goes so well with pork for some reason. And it helps to stop the meat from drying out too much, and it just lifts it up that little bit, just takes it that little notch above regular Scotch eggs. We're also going to need some plain flour. That's just going to help bind the egg wash to our sausage once we're doing the coating. And for that actual coating, we're just going to need some breadcrumbs. I usually like to use panko breadcrumbs, but I couldn't get hold of them today, so I'm just using some of these plain old breadcrumbs. They'll work just as well. Then last of all, for our seasoning, just some salt and pepper. We're also going to add a little bit of nutmeg, and if you remember from the sausage roll recipe last week, if you watched that, then there is such a thing as a lethal dose of nutmeg. So we're just using a pinch of this. If you have like 2 to 3 teaspoons of nutmeg, it can make you seriously ill. It's a true thing, look it up. So be very careful with the amounts of nutmeg that you're using, please. Then last of all, we're just going to need some flavourless oil like sunflower oil. You could use groundnut oil as well. This is just for frying our Scotch eggs in. We're going to use about 4 to 5 centimetres of oil, which sounds like a lot, but it's the best way to do these, I feel, because sometimes people deep fry the egg, and I find that's a bit much. It creates a little bit too much mess. Sure, it might be a bit nicer. It's also a bit naughtier, and it's just a little bit longer. I prefer just shallow fry in a little bit of oil. So that's it. That's all the ingredients that we need for our Scotch eggs. It's not too intimidating. They're all quite common. You pick them up in your local supermarket, no problem. Now let's move on with the actual making of our sausage roll. I keep saying sausage rolls today. It's not sausage rolls, it's Scotch eggs. Let's get on with making our Scotch eggs. God damn it. First thing we're going to want to do is to get our eggs boiled. So I've got a nice big pan of boiling water here. It's got a real good rolling boil on. What we're going to want to do is to pop our eggs in, but we're just going to gently lower them in with a slotted spoon because we don't want to drop them in and risk breaking them. So we're just going to lower each one in gently, gently. So we're going to let these boil away for about 5 minutes. These will give them a nice soft boiled consistency. Most people associate hard boiled eggs with Scotch eggs, but it's something about having a nicely runny yolk, just slightly runny yolk in your Scotch eggs still. So giving them that soft boiled texture will allow them to hopefully retain a little bit of runny yolk when we're cooking them in the oil as well. About 5 minutes will do, so we'll leave those to boil away and come back in about 5 minutes. So our eggs have had about 5 minutes, and with this very rare view of my sink, I am going to immediately start chucking some cold water onto our eggs because this will stop the cooking process of the eggs. Otherwise they will carry on cooking and you'll end up with hard-boiled eggs if you don't get them straight under some cold water. You could just have a bowl of cold water or ice water handy to plunge the eggs into, but I'm trying to keep things relatively tidy, not have too many bowls running around. Running around? I don't know if bowls run around your house, but they do around mine. I've got some weird ass bowls, man. So our eggs are now completely in cold water, so we're going to leave these just to cool right down. So while these are cooling down, let's go and make our sausage meat. Now for our sausage meat, it's quite simple. All we're going to need to do is be able to get this sausage meat out of our sausages, and to do that, all we need to do is grab a sausage.
What?
Oh no.
So we just need to grab a sausage and give it a good squeeze. We're just basically going to squeeze the meat out of the sausage, out of the end like so. I showed you how to do this last week on the sausage roll video, but in case you didn't watch that, this is what you can do. It should come out quite easily. If it doesn't, then you can always split the skin and get the meat out that way as well, but that seems to come out quite nicely. This is going to come up to probably about 400 grams worth of sausage meat. So if you do manage to pick up the packs of sausage meat, 400 grams is about what you'll need. Works out to about 100 grams per egg. So I'm just going to keep doing this until I've got all the sausage meat out of these sausages. So come back in like 2 minutes.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
There we go, as if by magic, all the sausage meat is now out of the sausages. So that gives us a really good amount of sausage meat, which we are now going to season with a little bit of salt. Give it a few grinds. I mean, it's probably roughly about half a teaspoon. We don't want to salt it too much because pork is naturally quite salty. And then some pepper. This is more to taste. It depends on how much you like black pepper or how much the people who you are serving to like black pepper. I quite like it, so I'm giving it a good few grinds. That'll probably be enough. And again, just a pinch of nutmeg, just a shake. So we've got our seasoning in our sausages. Now we're just going to give it that extra kick with our apple. And the quickest thing for me to do is to grab a knife, cut right down the middle, and cut it again into quarters. I like to cut the core out this way. You might have an apple corer, that might be the easier way of doing things. I prefer to do it this way. So I'm just chopping the core out of these, making sure to get rid of the pips because we don't want to grate pips into our sausage meat. So now we've got our seeds and our core out of our apple. I'm just going to grate this like so with this box grater. So that's getting a bit dangerously close. I can show you what we can do with that in a moment. If you don't have a box grater, you could use a food processor. Ideally, a grater or a food processor is probably the best way you can get the best results of this. If you're confident with your knife skills, you could try and chop this up very, 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 very finely. But you'd have to be very, very good with the knife to do that. So that's our apple grated, but we've still got some of the skin here. It seems like a shame to waste that because there's loads of flavour in here. So I'm going to try it and very, very finely chop this. Finely chop this, almost like if you were making a chunky coleslaw or something like that. Apple in coleslaw is great, no pun intended. So that will give us a few nice chunks of apple as well, which will give it a nice bite in the Scotch egg if you get one of them. Right, with our freshly grated apple, we will pop this into here. Do it quickly because it doesn't take long for a apple to start to oxidize and go brown. You can probably see it's starting to go a little bit brown already. If you need to do this a bit earlier, you can chuck a little bit of lemon juice into the apple and that stops it from browning so quickly. But we're doing this straight away, so let's get all of this mixed together. Get in there with your hands. You're going to need to get in there with your hands later anyway. There we go, that's our sausage meat all nicely seasoned and our apple incorporated. So now we can get on with actually forming our Scotch egg. I'm going to clean it in my hands and then we can get started with that process. Right, my eggs are cooled, I've taken the shells off. You have to be quite careful with these because they are quite soft because we have soft boiled them. So this step you're going to have to be very, very careful not to split your eggs. You can see I've set up a kind of production line here with my egg, my flour, my breadcrumbs and a plate for putting our finely formed Scotch eggs onto. So I'm going to grab one of my eggs very, very carefully. I'm going to use that one. I'm going to pop it there for a moment. I've got my sausage meat off screen because I haven't got any more room on the camera. So I'm going to take a good handful of the sausage meat, spread it out in my hand into like a circle, a patty, almost like we're making like sausage burgers or something like that. And pop your egg in there carefully, and then we're going to very, very gently want to bring like shape and mold the meat up around the egg. Do this very, very carefully, trying not to squash the egg. Gently, gently bring it up and round using your hands. Turn it over, trying to get the meat from all the way around it. It's making some lovely squelching noises here. I'm sure that's lovely for you. Maybe a bit of ASMR there for you. Lovely squidgy, meaty ASMR. So you can see I've got, oh, see, that's why you got to check. You got to check that your meat hasn't come away from somewhere else. Make sure your egg is completely covered. And if you need to grab a bit more meat to cover up all these cracks, then do so. Got to make sure that your egg is completely encased. Otherwise you do run the risk of it splitting and the egg poking out, which is not ideal, but it's also not the end of the world because you still will get a nice tasting Scotch egg out of it. So you can see I've now got that well formed. So there is nothing poking out around here, you can see. Now that's done. Now we've got to do our 3 steps of getting this coated. So first of all, you roll it in your flour, otherwise the egg won't stick on the next step. At this point you can also kind of see if any cracks or anything have appeared. And then into our egg, all the way around, coating everything. Try and get off some of the excess. This is a messy step, you're going to get messy on here. And then into our breadcrumbs and coat that all over in the breadcrumbs. Just make sure that's all coated as well. Just roll it around, being very, very careful with it because it's still quite fragile because of our soft boiled egg. So if you start throwing this around, it'll just go splat. Not that I recommend throwing them around anyway, but you know what I mean. So that's one done. So I'm going to repeat this process for the other 3. So I have coated the other 2 Scotch eggs. We've got 4 very nicely formed Scotch eggs here, or what will be Scotch eggs once they're actually cooked in the oil. So that will be our next step. So I am going to get all this stuff cleared away, get a nice clean surface going on, and then we can move on to the step of frying in the oil, which is always fun. Right, for the next and final step of our Scotch eggs, we are going to need to fry up our eggs in some oil. So I've got the sunflower oil in here, probably about 4 or 5 centimetres in a very nice deep pan. You can use something like a wok or anything like that. Probably want about 4 or 5 centimetres of oil. Shallow fry these. You can deep fry them, but as I said earlier, I'm not gonna. And we want to bring this up. I've got my digital thermometer here. I want to bring this up to about 170 degrees C, probably somewhere between 160 and 170. So I'm going to use my handy dandy thermometer here. It's always good to keep one of these around. They're not very expensive. I've got this on probably like a fairly high heat, medium high. It's a 7 on my cooker, but it'll probably be different on yours. Right, that's on 170 degrees C, so that is a good time to get our Scotch eggs in. If you don't have a digital thermometer like that, what you can do is you can just get some of the breadcrumbs that you had earlier, chuck it in. If it starts to fry like that, then you're good to go. And I'm going to very, very carefully pop in the first of our Scotch eggs. Be very, very careful when you do this. The oil is so hot, you can seriously burn yourself if you just splash it in there. And I probably don't need to say, if you've got kids, don't do this recipe with them unless they're a lot older and a lot more responsible, because things could go wrong. That is the serious portion of this video over and done with, but I'm sure you've got enough common sense to know that hot oil is very, very dangerous. So I think I can get all of our eggs in here. If they're a bit larger, you might be able to get only 3 in at a time, but I think I can get all 4 in. So these can probably cook for about 8 to 10 minutes. Don't leave them unsupervised. Always keep your eye on them, because they can go very brown very quickly on one side, and obviously you've got to keep an eye on that hot oil, make sure it doesn't bubble up and over. Sorry, another serious portion of the video there, but last thing I want is you guys injuring yourselves. I do stupid things so you don't have to. So I'll let these cook for probably about 4 minutes on one side, and then we can turn them over once they're golden brown. So these have probably had about 4 minutes on one side, so I'm just gently going to turn them over to the other side. You can see that side is lovely golden brown. We'll do the same for this one. So you can see those sides are a really nice golden brown. Probably on this one, because it's quite deep, we're probably going to need to get it around here, because you don't want to leave any uncooked sausage meat. This one you can probably see is going to end up with a bit of a ring around it. So we're going to make sure we need to get this bit as well. Make sure you don't leave any uncooked bits, because last thing you want to do is give yourself food poisoning, or worse, give someone else food poisoning. You just got to be ultra careful with cooking, especially stuff like pork, because pork's, you've got to make sure it is cooked to a decent temperature, especially sausages. So these have had a good 10 minutes of cooking now, so they are nice and golden brown. So I'm going to get these onto some kitchen towel. So that kitchen towel is going to soak up some of that oil while these cool down, because we want these to cool down completely. You could eat them hot, but I've never had a hot Scotch egg and I don't know what that would be like. So these are best left to cool down completely, so they're cold. And because we're doing picnic food, they're going to be best cold. So I'm going to put these to one side, leave them to cool down completely, and we can come back later and give them a try. In the meantime, I've still got some oil on the go. I've still got some ingredients left over, so I'm going to try making a couple more and see how they go. So I'll see you in a little while. Here are our completely cooled Scotch eggs. They look pretty good. They're a nice golden brown. They are a little bit uneven in places in the cooking. They're a little bit darker in places because we were shallow frying them rather than deep frying them, which would give us a much even cook. But it's what's on the inside that counts. Remember? That's the important thing. But they sound pretty good. They've got a nice crispiness on them, which sounds good. So I think it's time to cut into one of these and see how the egg is cooked. I'm hoping there'll be a bit of runniness to the yolk. So I'm just going to cut down through one of these. Oh yes, that is exactly what I was after. A lovely runny yolk. That is beautiful. See, that is how I like my Scotch eggs, with that runny yolk right in there. Now, if you don't want your eggs like this, that's absolutely fine. You can just leave the eggs to boil for a couple more minutes when you're cooking them in the shells, and that yolk will firm up more and you won't have that runny yolk. If you don't like your yolk like that, that's absolutely fine. Now, before we try this, I want to show you how something could go wrong. So I'm going to move these out the way. We have one that did not go quite as well. So you can see I didn't quite manage to seal this one up very well. We've got a bit of a crack there. It didn't seal up properly. Now it's going to taste fine still, but it's not very presentable. It's not something I would be happy serving up to someone else. See, it's all cooked nicely, but the egg looks a bit funky. And it's not something I really want to serve up to anyone, but I'll probably eat it myself. It'll be fine. But this is what happens if you don't seal in that egg well, so you end up with a bit of cracking and stuff like that. It's not the best, but I want to show you stuff like this because this is how you learn. You learn from your mistakes. If you do everything perfectly the first time, then there's something wrong with you, to be honest. Not many people do things right the first time. So if it does turn out like this the first time around, honestly, don't worry about it, don't stress. It's all a learning process. You'll get there in the end. I still get ones like this, even though this is like my 4th or 5th time making Scotch eggs. And it's going to happen. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to put this to one side. I'm going to grab my nicer looking Scotch egg and give it a go. So I've got my good Scotch egg here, not the ropey looking one, which I'm sure will still taste fine, but we're going for the nice looking one. Sorry, it's all about appearances today. I'm being superficial. But let's give this a go. To be honest, it's a Scotch egg. I'm going to be happy either way. As I said at the beginning of the video, I just love Scotch eggs, even if they're from like a ropey old garage. But these are proper homemade Scotch eggs with lovely runny yolks, so you're going to get that richness from the yolk. And you've got really good sausage meat here, and it's just all going to be really, really good. So I'm going to give it a go right now. Oh, I just love that runny yolk. That is what makes a perfect Scotch egg for me. It's got to have that runniness. Sorry, I've probably got all round beard, my face, everything. So I apologise in advance. You get that lovely, sorry, some people hate this word, but you get that lovely moist sausage meat there, which is helped by the apple that we put in there earlier. So it's not dry. It's all lovely and juicy, and it's so good. So that's how you make Scotch eggs. They are a bit more effort than the sausage rolls we did last week. It takes a bit longer, there's a few more steps involved, but they are so worth it. And if you chuck some of these in the picnic basket for when you go on a picnic, people are bound to be impressed, because Scotch eggs are a real favourite of most people, and if you put these into a picnic basket, you're bound to be onto a winner, to be honest. So that's it from me this week. I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope you found it useful. Who knows what I'm going to try next week? I think I'm going to stick with the picnic theme, but I'll probably veer away from the pork-based products next week, because that's 2 in a row, and I'll probably get complaints. Probably get complaints anyway, it's the internet. I'm going to go enjoy this. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you enjoy what I do, give the channel a subscribe, hit the notification bell. You know all that stuff if you're on the YouTubes regularly. Otherwise, I'm going to go off and enjoy this, and I will see you next week on Big Friendly Grub. Bye guys.